Well, the Governor of the Reserve Bank says he does accept that the recent decisions to raise interest rates haven't been popular, but says they have been based on solid evidence. Philip Lowe faced some sustained questioning in a Senate Estimates Committee today over the RBA's decision to increase interest rates 9 times in a row. Dr. Lowe says lifting rates are still the best way to tackle surging inflation, but said he did accept that it was causing pain for many Australians as their loan repayments and interest rates rose. Green Senator Nick McKim, who's been calling for Governor Lowe to resign, was among those asking the Governor some tough questions.
Dr. Lowe, you induced people into taking on record levels of debt by saying that interest rates were unlikely to increase until 2024. Then you later apologised if people had listened to you. Since you made that statement, you've put up interest rates 9 times in a row and flagged that there are more to come when the preconditions you set at that time for even a single rate rise have not yet been met. You've admitted overdoing monetary stimulus during the pandemic. You said that rents weren't likely to be significantly impacted by interest rate increases, but rents are currently going up at the fastest rate on record. You seem prepared to smash Australia into a recession by trying to squash demand in response to inflation that has, on the RBA's own analysis, been predominantly a result of supply-side factors. Can you explain to the renters and mortgage holders of Australia why you still deserve to hold your job?
I have a 7-year term as the Governor of the Bank, and I intend to serve out that term. It's an important job, comes with public accountability and is part of the process, but I intend to serve out that term.
A bit of accountability on display today. That is Philip Lowe, the Governor of the Reserve Bank in Canberra today. Martin North is founder and principal of Digital Finance Analytics. He was watching on with interest. Martin, good afternoon to you. What did you think of Governor Lowe's performance in the face of such scrutiny?
Well, I think McKim came in with a very fast set of balls, and the Governor played them back with a straight bat, I think. It was pretty much as expected to my mind. And of course, he did refer to the need to control inflation, that if you don't control inflation, things get considerably worse. But I think the Senator does have a point in terms of some of the deviations from strategy over the last few months and years from the RBA do leave some questions to be asked.
Certainly they were asked for some time again today. He's continued to resist any calls for his sacking or resignation and instead, as we heard, defended his record. Keen, though, to share the blame around when he got the opportunity, stressing that these decisions are all taken by the full Reserve Bank board.
Yeah, well, that's right. So all 9 of them chat round the table and, have debates. And he pretty much said, well, we come to a consensus and then he communicates it. But he was very, very careful to spread the load, as it were. It isn't just him. It is the board. There's a set of processes. Of course, that set of processes are currently under review. There's going to be a report that's going to come out in March, I think, looking at the structure of the RBA board and whether it's actually fit for purpose and what needs to change. I think there are things that need to be changed there. But he was very clear to understand that it's the board that makes decisions, not just him.
And yes, lots of talk about what the makeup of that board should ideally be and how they do what they do. Meanwhile, Dr. Lowe was also grilled on why he appeared at a Barrenjoey, a finance company event, despite not having made his annual public address following the bank's first board meeting of the year. His people are saying, listen, what are you talking to them for rather than explaining to the public what's happening and why?
Yes, and there's a couple of interesting observations there. Firstly, of course, he says, well, that's part of the job. I meet a lot of different people, a lot of different domains. He also made the point that, sure, while he was speaking, the bond rate did move, but then the New Zealand bond rate moved pretty much the same as well. So he was arguing that nothing to do with what he was saying to that particular audience. But I do think it does raise a question about transparency and about how much communication and appropriate communication, and the fact that some of those bankers who will be in a position potentially to take positions based on what he says may have an advantage relative to the rest of the community. So, and he did actually concede, I think, that probably he wouldn't do it again, if he had his time over. But there is a broader question here about the communication mechanisms that the RBA uses. To what extent do people understand why they're doing what they're doing and who they're talking to? And generally, I would say that whilst they do interact with the big end of town and bankers and, other people, they're not really engaging really with ordinary businesses and ordinary households. And I think that's a massive gap at the moment, which means maybe the RBA is a bit myopic when it comes to the impact of their decisions.
Need a bit more feedback from those on the ground, those directly affected in real terms by their decisions. All right, what about some of the substance of what he said? Perhaps the bad news first, starting with rates and rents. He again confirmed more rate hikes are on the way.
That's right. Now, he wouldn't be drawn precisely where the rate would end up, but, he did in the Tuesday announcement, say rate rises, plural, so you can assume another 2 or maybe 3. It would determine partly by, I think, what happens with the Federal Reserve, and around the world too. But we have to expect more rate rises. And of course, the statement on monetary policy also made the point that rates are going to stay high for longer because of the fact that inflation is relatively intractable at the moment. And inflation is connected both to services but also to the rest of the economy now. So, it is actually more complicated than just saying, it's all supply side driven, it's going to go away. We have some wage rises. He did say that he felt that wage rises would be a little lower over the next year or so. And in fact, that that sort of circular argument of inflation means more wages means greater wage rises hasn't really yet broken out in Australia, but he is concerned that it might.
All right, so in the short term, some good news on the supply side issues maybe subsiding and no great alarm on the wages just yet. The Commonwealth Bank Chief, McKim, has defended Mr Lowe, Dr Lowe, saying that the job of the RBA governor is not a popularity contest and requires some difficult decision-making. How are you scoring their approach on rates? Have they got the balance right, or might they tip us into recession, as some fear?
Well, I go back a bit further. I think they did take rates too low. I do think they threw too much liquidity into the system. And Lowe did say, look, in 2020 when COVID was here, nobody knew, and so it was best to take out insurance policies, as it were, in terms of doing too much rather than too little. But they went on way too long. So it was quite clear that they could have actually changed direction sooner. If they'd done that, I don't think we'd have had to have seen interest rates so high. So in a way, the RBA has been responsible for creating the monster in the first place, the inflation monster. Now they're trying to tame it. And of course, the question is, do they have the right tools to tame it? They only have one blunt instrument, which is lifting interest rates. Interest rate rises are going to hit a proportion of the households and businesses in Australia very, very hard. And there is a risk, I think, that we could see a recession on the back of this. They talk about steering a narrow path. Well, I've got my fingers and toes crossed that we can do that, but I do think there's a significant risk that with higher rates, we're going to tip ourselves into recession, and that's going to have ramifications later.
Dr Lowe, as we heard, was asked why he shouldn't be sacked before his term expires in September, but he says he wants to see out this term.
I have a 7-year term as the Governor of the Bank, and I intend to serve out that term. It's an important job, comes with public accountability and is part of the process, but I intend to serve out that term.
That's this term, Martin North. Is another term likely, or is his time up?
I wouldn't be surprised if, when it comes to September, there's a bit of a shuffling of the deck chairs. The report will be out on the future of the Reserve Bank and how it's going to be governed. It also gives the Treasurer a little bit of wriggle room, because he can basically blame Lowe for all of the shenanigans over these few months, and then by the autumn, later on in the year, in September, October time, maybe it'll be time then to have a fresh broom through. But the fact of the matter is that we are in the situation where this inflation genie is out of the bottle. It has to be put back in, because if it doesn't get put back in, then we're just going to find that the real value of money decreases even more. Wage rises are going to go up. So we risk creating a bigger crisis. Therefore, maybe in the short term, the right thing is to let Lowe drive the agenda with the rest of the RBA members there to drive this interest rate higher. But I think later, probably a change is due.
Let's watch that space. We'll talk again, Martin. Thanks a lot. Martin North, founder and principal of Digital Finance Analytics, on the performance of the Reserve Bank Governor today and in the last few years. 3:15 Eastern Daylight Time, 2:45 South Australian Time and 2:15 in Queensland.